Well, welcome everybody. Thanks, parents, for joining us for Back to School Night. This is our introduction into accelerated composition and syntactical analysis. My name is Jeff Marsh, and I teach the course. Originally, I did not call the course this really clunky title. Originally, I called it Advanced Grammar and Rhetoric, so I'll oftentimes refer to it as Advanced Grammar. And if you ask your son or daughter, they'll probably say that they have advanced grammar or a grammar class. And that says a lot about you and a lot about them, that they're excited or willing to take a grammar class. I get a lot of juniors and seniors who take the course because they're getting ready to take the SAT or they're getting ready to go into college, and they want to get good at their grammar and they want to improve their writing. And those are all things that we're going to do within this course. So what I want to do is I'm walk you through the 8 units that we have. I'm going to talk about how we are graded in the class, and then show you also the syllabus that we will use. I'm sorry, the syllabus. We'll show you the Schoology page that we're going to use for all that will house all the information the students will need. So the very first unit we take on is what we call going old school. We kind of lay the foundation. We understand all the different, we call form and structure classes, which we used to call parts of speech. And then we get into the basics of sentence diagramming, something that I did when I was in school, and maybe you did when you were in school. It's this very old-fashioned way of learning how to take a sentence apart and show how it all relates. It actually was quite popular from the early 1900s all the way up through the mid 1980s. I even learned it when I was in college in the 1990s. And so we use this as a way of sort of manipulating the words and understanding how they're all related, but it will also show us how to punctuate a sentence. It'll show us where there are errors in the sentence. So this is a very basic diagram that we would learn in the first 3 weeks. So this is something that very early on in our time, and eventually, maybe within maybe a month or so, your son or daughter will be able to do something like this. As complex as that looks, we'll be able to take that on relatively early in our time together. And the reason we would look at a sentence like this is we would also be able to recognize where there are errors and where there are common interpretations of words. So, for example, in this one, we might pick up on the idea that it says by Kelly's wanting a milkshake, where a lot of people would say by Kelly wanting a milkshake, and we would realize why we have to say Kelly's. It's something we would take on in class. We would also recognize in this diagram that there's an error. There's an error down here where we're missing the word there, Their, because you couldn't say before going to the dance, but you have to say before there, not them going to the dance, but before they're going to the dance. These are all kind of the quirky things that we're going to learn about grammar in class. And that's what I love about the course is I get to teach them everything that there is to know about grammar and the English language, and just to see them grow in their knowledge and to be able to apply that. That's a great thing. After that, we're going to take on a deep dive into different parts of speech. So we're going to start off with the verb, and we're going to do a deep dive into the verb. And within each unit, we're doing a lot of SAT preparations because a lot of my students are juniors getting ready to take the SAT, maybe for the first or maybe the second or third time. So we're going to jump into the verbs. We're going to talk particularly about subject-verb agreement, for example, and even going from active to passive voice. Into our third unit, this is where we're going to take on a deep dive into nouns and really get into more complex structures beyond a noun, but things that actually try to act as nouns. And we're going to learn that oftentimes most sentences don't take commas, but we got to get a little comma crazy. So this is one of the fun units where we realize we can make really complex structures that take no commas at all. And that by the end of the first marking period that we have together, we're going to take on that you live only once. There was a hashtag that was floating around for the longest time, which was hashtag YOLO, you only live once, which is grammatically incorrect. So we'll take on a deep dive into adverbs and look at where adverbs are placed and how when they move, how they change the meaning, which is a very common question on the SAT. Into this second marking period that we have together, we'll start off with the infamous buffalo sentence. You may not know this, but if you say the word buffalo 8 times in a row and capitalize it 3 of the 8 times, that's a grammatically correct sentence in the English language, as weird as that is. So we're going to do a deep dive into adjectives and adjective structures, and we'll start understanding when we punctuate them and when we don't. Then we'll jump into the punctuation rejuvenation, which is usually at around a time where students are just about maybe to take one of their SATs. And so in this unit, we're going to focus on the major punctuation marks of the colon, the semicolon, the comma, and the dash on the SAT. But we're also going to look at a lot of other punctuation marks around punctuation rules. So we're going to get really heavy into that in this unit. Next is they nuts? We have to talk about pronouns in the 21st century and how language changes. And so we're going to talk about how pronouns are being sort of tweaked and turned and asked of us to whether we want to adjust them in the 21st century with pronouns. And so we're going to take a look at the use of the word they and whether it is singular or whether it's plural. We'll take a look at pronoun agreement, which is very common on the SAT. And we'll talk about how the SAT views pronouns, and if that's and making sure that we understand exactly how they want us to see pronouns, but we'll talk about how pronouns seem to be changing. And then lastly is Unit 8. And in Unit 8, we're going to get the chance to showboat our writing techniques a little bit more by really stretching and bending some of the rules. One of the best things we get to do in class is learn all the rules of grammar and then get to bend them and really improve our writing. We write throughout the semester, but this last unit is our chance to really see some really unique structures that no one really knew existed, and also to kind of bend some of the rules to kind of see how we can be more stylish with our voices as writers. And then lastly, right before final exams, we get to engage in what we call Grammar Olympics, which is just some silliness that we do for about 4 or 5 days. We put all of our grammar knowledge together. It's a way of reviewing our time together and getting ready for the final exam. So it is a lot of fun. So in my class, we break our grading down into 20% and 80%. And 20% comes from our homework, our classwork, any drafts that we do for our writings, and any projects. And our projects vary. Sometimes we'll make children's books and short stories. We'll do board games. Sometimes we'll make grammar superheroes and grammar villains. The other 80%, so therefore the majority of our grades will come from quizzes and tests, and we'll have approximately 4 major tests each marking period. But occasionally we'll also have some in-class assessments where I've taught something and I want to see before I get to a bigger test if we understand what's going on. So we'll do some in-class assessments, and then any writing assignments will always be under the category of assessment or the 80% category. So our drafts will go under homework, but our final writing assignment will come under the 80% category. In terms of my policies, I'm pretty strict on my late policy. I don't like things being turned in late. And so when students turn something in at the end of the day, if it was due at the beginning of the day, I give them half the points, but I don't take anything late. And that usually works out that students realize that if the man doesn't want to take anything late, they don't turn things in late. I think it's really good for them to learn about deadlines and to be held accountable to them. So I don't usually get a lot of pushback from kids on that. They accept that and they adhere to it. In case we have online quizzes, I don't usually like those, but if I have to give some online quizzes, I usually open them up till 11:59, and then the students have until that time to actually finish their quiz. If they miss the time, the quiz closes, and so they have to come see me and explain to me why they missed the quiz and why I should reopen it for them. And lastly are test corrections and retakes. I don't guarantee that I would offer a test correction or a retake, but I always tell kids it's good to ask anyway. I don't want to see anyone not do the best that he or she possibly could in class. And so if they had a test that just was miserable and it just did not seem like it was as successful as it could have been for them, I'll say, hey, they can certainly approach me rather and say, Mr. Marsh, can we do some kind of test correction or a retake? And I always tell them, we'll meet, we'll talk about what went wrong, what you've been studying, and see if we can figure out what would be better to either retake the whole test or just simply work through some corrections. So it's a fun class, and I'm so glad they're taking it. And I think once again, it says a lot about you as parents that you have students who are willing and actually excited about taking a grammar class. I think it's fun. So let me show you what the Schoology page looks like. So in case your son or daughter is ever at home and he or she needs to find information on Schoology, or you want to find the information on Schoology, that you can see it. So let's get rid of this little guy. This is what our Schoology page looks like. And so the units that we're currently in are orange. And then once the unit is over, it'll turn black. And so right now, this is unit 1. If I were in this unit, if I clicked on it, it would open up here. And you can see these are the days that have already passed. This is the current day that we would be on. And then after that are these white folders of the days that are coming up. So nothing's ever closed. And so even though this is the day that we're working on, they can always go back and see previous days in case they need to find any of that information. And once they open up that page, they would then be able to find all the activities that we're going to do that day. It's very slow right now. Look at that. So then once they open up this day, they would be able to find the different tasks. Oftentimes, I'll show you an example. Within sometimes the folders, there are the worksheets that we're working on in class, I oftentimes will then post the answer key for them as well. And then sometimes there are videos as well that kind of help them understand the information, some instructional videos. So that way, if they are at home, they're also getting the instructions that we're also doing at class. Back once again to the main page. And along the side here is our calendar. So it kind of shows them what things are happening so that way they know exactly what's being asked of them. And the students also know if we're working on a bigger project, it's always in purple. In this case, we're working on a writing assignment currently, and therefore all their materials are in here for them as well. And this is all something that they're very familiar with, but I just want to make sure that you're familiar with them as well. Anyway, so once again, I'm so happy that they're taking advanced grammar. And if there's ever anything that you need from me, please feel free to reach out to me through email, or you can call the school, and I'll gladly get back to you if you have any questions at all.